Since the turn of the century, China has been advancing into Africa. Chinese companies have struck deals worth tens of billions of dollars for oil, minerals, roads, and bridges. Last week in Beijing, the mysterious middleman at the heart of some of those big African deals was detained. It seems he has fallen afoul of the Communist Party. That middleman has 7 names, but is best known as Sam Pa. The FT published an investigation into him last year, and Tom Burgess, who spent years examining his deals, is here. Tom, who is this guy?
Well, as you say, he's got 7 names, mostly Chinese, but he's best known as Sam Pa, or at least best known as that in Africa, where he's made his fortune. He's a pretty mysterious character. We think that his background is either working in or alongside Chinese intelligence services. This is back in the 80s and 90s, the time when everybody was trying to forge political ties with the new ruling regimes in Africa, post-independence. And Sam just happens to be in the right place at the right time. He has some good contacts, he's dabbled in business a little bit, and then around the turn of the century, Chinese companies surge forward into the world looking for natural resources and infrastructure contracts and markets. And Sam's a guy who has some connections in African capitals and can open doors, and that's exactly what he starts to do, initially in Angola as it emerges from the Civil War and becomes really the linchpin of China's thrust into Africa. He makes connections there. He seems to trade on his contacts. He seems to trade on this idea in China of guanxi, of your connectedness, your relationships, the equivalent of your Rolodex, I suppose. Sam can play on his connections in Angola, in other African capitals, and in Beijing, and he gets very large but also very opaque deals done, initially for oil, but also for infrastructure. And he's risen to become an incredibly influential man. He hangs out with presidents. He recently dined with the president of Sierra Leone. He hangs out with the president of Angola. He's close to Robert Mugabe's regime in Zimbabwe. Admittedly, some of the most unsavory African regimes. And it's those links, and specifically those links to Mugabe, that have put a few people's hackles out. He's now on the US sanctions list as of last year. And he's the core of this thing called the Queensway Group, this kind of strange private state mixture of assets that underpins many of the Chinese relationships in Africa.
And it operates, that Queensway group is 88 Queensway.
That's
the address, and that operates out of Hong Kong, right?
Yeah.
But last week, he was detained or taken away from a hotel in Beijing. What do you know about that?
Yeah, so as ever with the inner workings of Chinese politics, to some extent we're reading the tea leaves and trying to work out what's going on from the outside. What we understand is that Sam was in Beijing, where he often is, and he was taken away, we believe, from a hotel, the Sofitel in Beijing. It appears that this is part of an investigation by the Central Disciplinary Commission of the Communist Party, which is effectively in China the top investigative body. And Sam's detention, not arrest, not charge, anything like this, detention is what appears to be part of a Communist Party process, came very shortly after an investigation was begun into Su Zhelin, who fell as the governor of Fujian province, and has also crucially been a previous boss of Sinopec, which is one of the big Chinese oil companies, and one of the ones that has been at the center of Sam Pa's role as a middleman. So Sam helped to take Sinopec into Africa, specifically into Angola, now one of the biggest suppliers of oil to China. And Sam's companies, the companies he represents, the private companies in Hong Kong, they were cut in as shareholders on that deal. And from there, everything else expands. So it's the relationship between Sinopec and Sam Pa, and specifically Su, who also seems to be out in the cold now. That seems to be the heart of what's happened to him. He's a man who trades on connections. If one of his patrons has gone down, that leaves him vulnerable.
Well, I'm sure we're going to be hearing more about Sam Pa. Thank you, Tom, and we look forward to your stories.
Thanks.